joining us today, welcome. And please use the chat box this morning because this is a topic, PBIS and alternative ed settings. This is a topic that actually could be an entire workshop day. It could probably even be 2 days because there's so much to cover. But my hope is today that we're going to pique your interest a little bit and share some resources. And certainly Joanne Swayze from the Hope Center for Autism is here today from Martin County. And she's going to share how it looks at her place. But please keep in mind when we're talking about alternative ed settings, there's a lot of different settings that are out there. And so we're just going to be touching the surface today and then also providing you with some resources if you want to look into those later. So we are recording today, so just so you are aware, and it will be posted on our website. Betsy does a fabulous job. It's already there. I think the resources are already on our website, but the recording will be posted later for you all. Okay, let me exit the screen. Not sure why. I know why. Fine, here we go. I apologize. All right, so today our objective, I'm going to minimize you all. Primarily, we want to learn how the essential elements of PBIS framework may be adapted in your alternative settings to serve the unique characteristics of students with disabilities. And that's really important. We're going to be talking about unique characteristics this morning. We're going to provide some insight into one alternative setting that has successfully adapted PBIS to improve disciplinary and academic outcomes. I am joined today by Joanne Swayze, CEO of the Hope Center for Autism in Martin County. And Joanne and I have worked together since, I think, around the time of around 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in that time frame, right, Joanne?
Yes.
We both worked in Martin County, and Joanne was a primary staff member to the behavior team, has worked with students with autism. She's worked with EBD students. She just has a wealth of experience to share with us today. So that's what we hope to share for you all. Hey, I just see. So if you would in the chat box, and Betsy, help me out since I can't see it. Why are you interested in today's TA chat? Or what do you hope to learn today? Let's see, I can open mine.
And so the first comment was that the person works at an alternative school. So they work in the setting.
Great.
And then Julie Hayden says she supports a few alternative schools in St. Johns County.
Wonderful. Anything you have to share this morning, Julie, just type in the chat box.
Rebecca from Santa Rosa said info to support our alternative schools that have joined PBIS this year.
Ah, wonderful. Great.
Molly from Triad in Sarasota says, I work in an alternative setting as a behavior specialist and I'm looking for new tools. Oh, you've got lots of responses. Lauren Kowalski, to be able to support alternative schools with continuing to develop their individual PBIS programs. Learning new strategies. Let's see. WLC, this is Deb Stoll. She says they're interested in learning how to support students through their transient throughout the year. So coming in.
Yeah. That WLC is Willoughby Learning Center, which is also in Martin County.
Nice. And then we have some folks that are coaches supporting alternative schools that have seen an increase in students skipping. And so they wanted some ideas for how to support that. And lastly, oh, nope, there's more. Doreen from Glades, I'd like to be able to support schools with students with special needs across the board. And then Alexandra Kaiser from Sarasota says she's the PBIS coordinator at a center school for students that are medically fragile and those that are EBD.
Okay.
So, variety of needs.
All right, great. So continue to use that chat box as we move through today. I do have a lot of information to share, but we always like to hear from you all as well. So just a little terminology. And different states have, excuse me, one second. Pardon me. States have different definitions and for terminology that we commonly use when we're talking about alternative settings. So alternative measures for students with special needs or special programs are really designated to meet those special needs of students that typically cannot be met by regular school curricula. So we're looking at a unique group of students who are struggling in that general education population or at a regular school environment. The exceptional students are students who have been determined eligible for a special program in accordance with the rules of the State Board of Ed, and special ed services, specially designed instruction, and such related services as are necessary for an exceptional student to benefit from education. So we're going to be talking and using this kind of terminology today. So just wanted to say up front and be clear with what those terminology indicate. As many of you know, there's a continuum of alternative education settings out there. So we have classrooms that are designed to meet the needs of the unique students and create specific learning environments for them, but they are in a gen ed setting or in a regular school. We also have discipline day schools. So students that are struggling with meeting expectations and rules, not being able to follow those rules, or the setting is maybe somewhat too much of an environment. It's maybe a large school and they just really struggle. So a discipline day school is sometimes an option versus being suspended or expelled. We have therapeutic day schools, and I just want to mention this kind of falls into the next one, residential mental health treatment programs. There is also a residential mental health treatment program in Martin County, that Riverbend Academy, that's done a fabulous job, and it is a school within a hospital setting. So that is a very unique environment, and they do a really great job there adapting and including PBIS. Juvenile justice programs, certainly. This last fall at the Chicago Forum, we heard from juvenile justice programs that were implementing PBIS, and learned about their process and how they've been able to adapt PBIS into their settings and experience some really positive outcomes. And then we also have some settings that are for credit recovery. So I was interested in some of the state and national data. And so this is what the map of the United States looks like in terms of serving individuals with disabilities from the age of 3 to 21. So you'll see that Florida has 15% students that have been identified with a disability. And those specific disability types are listed there on the left in terms of national. And then I've added the Florida statistics as well. So we are pretty much in line. We're 5 percentage points ahead with specific learning disabilities. But everything else is pretty much in line with what we see on a national level. Interestingly enough, this one, I guess, surprised me a little bit, but I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, right, by any data that we uncover about where students with disabilities are educated. And nationally, they're really educated in regular schools, which on one thought, I'm like, great, because if the school is implementing PBIS, that should naturally translate into those special classrooms where they're educating students with unique needs and characteristics. Then on the other hand, I thought, but wait a minute, wonder if they're not collaborating with the PBIS system. Maybe those individual classrooms are not being looped in to that process, and that can present a problem. So again, this is like a plus, but yet it leads me to some questions about how are we including students with disabilities with PBIS and making sure that they have access to multi-tiered system of support. So they're learning about tier one. They have access, or I'm sorry, not learning about tier one, but included with tier one. they also have access to tier 2 with those supplemental supports. So it's very important to be thinking about how are we collaborating with those special classrooms in our regular education setting. So in Florida, the 15% amounts to about 10,424 kiddos. It's a lot of kiddos, or 25% of students with disabilities are learning in an aid setting, and 75% of students learning in alternative ed settings do not have a disability. So I found that kind of interesting, and it led to some other questions down the road. A common concern that we often hear when we are conducting our YIP, our yearly implementation plan, and everyone on the call today is probably familiar with our yearly implementation planning, where we bring our district leaders together and sometimes stakeholders from outside of the district as well to talk about data, to also begin action planning. And this is a common concern, discipline. Some of our alternative centers talk about increasing office discipline referrals, suspensions, expulsions. How do we adapt this environment in order to meet the unique needs and lower and improve our discipline outcomes? So if we're looking at students with disabilities, and I pulled this from Know Your Schools portal, fldoe.org. And by the way, that is a fabulous site where you can actually sort all of the information that goes into FLDOE as it relates to discipline, and you can create charts and you can learn a lot about what's happening in Florida with our gen ed students as well as our students with disabilities. So we have an enrollment of 15%, but 30% have experienced one or more in-school suspension. So we're looking at a disproportionate rate because 69% of our students have not. And then our 30% of our students with disabilities are experiencing at least one out of school suspension. So that's well above what we would want to see in terms of proportions. And more than one out of school suspension, 39% compared to 60% of our students without disabilities. So that's a significant concern, is that when we think about students leaving the regular environment or gen ed environment, because they have unique characteristics and they've encountered frequent discipline, we want to make sure that we are adapting our environment so that does not continue to happen. So now we know that there's a common concern of discipline, but we also have to look at disproportionate outcomes that we experience. Now, this is just data from all of our schools that share their data with us. And we do have a significant amount of schools sharing data with us. So you'll see that the average risk for office discipline referrals as it relates to students with IEPs, students without IEPs, which is on the top right, if you're looking at the screen. And on the top left, you'll see the gap between our African-American students and our other subgroups. At the bottom of the screen, you're going to see the average risk of out-of-school suspensions compared to Black African-American students as well as students with IEPs. And they can certainly be, students with IEPs can certainly be identified as African-American, multiracial, white, etc. So it becomes important when you're looking at your school environment to disaggregate that data to give you some additional information as to how you might problem solve around these issues and these concerns. Let's dig into some of those adaptations and or modifications to that PBIS framework. And we know y'all are probably familiar with this slide. This is our slide that we use frequently in terms of defining, but really making sure that we're disaggregating our data. We are looking at students with disabilities. We're looking at students that are receiving education within that regular environment or outside of that regular environment. What systems and practices are in place to produce outcomes that we're hoping for? So if we have disproportionality among our students with IEPs, what might we do differently? How might we disaggregate that data even deeper to determine how we might adapt and make changes so that we do have better outcomes? We know if we reduce those behavioral challenges among our students, we know that we're going to see better outcomes for sure. When schools implement Tier 1 with fidelity, the research tells us that we're going to see fewer behavioral challenges and also decreased clinical symptoms or internalizing, externalizing problems in concentration. And so these are typically some of those behaviors that we see among our students with disabilities or have IEPs. So we want to make sure that we are implementing with Tier 1. When I've done walkthroughs at alternative education centers that were experiencing poor outcomes, increased restraints, seclusions when that was allowed, um, escape, that was also, escaping students or students being out of area, we discovered that Tier 1 was not in place at all. So Tier 1 seems to be that magical key that can help us really produce better outcomes. So we need to take a hard look at our environment and really determine, are we implementing with fidelity? Look at each of those benchmarks of quality. Pull out the tiered fidelity index inventory or TFI. Are we being honest and taking a hard look? And do we have supportive materials that indicate, yeah, we're implementing with fidelity? Also, when implemented with fidelity, we will see reduced exclusionary discipline. So fewer office discipline referrals will lead to fewer suspensions, of course. So the why, sometimes it's absolutely necessary that our students are placed in an alternative education setting because those settings are tailored to accommodate the diverse learning styles. They can accommodate behavioral supports. They have special resources that may not be available to the gen ed setting. And we also find that there's an increase in mental health services available to support our kids. So our students oftentimes have experienced a significant amount of trauma. So if we're not even approaching that setting with a trauma-informed lens, looking at mental wellness, mental health, providing mental health services, we may be missing and creating some of those gaps that you might find in a gen ed setting. Our goals when they're placed in AE settings would be to personalize that setting and provide flexible educational experiences that better suit the need of those individual students that they may not get in the gen ed setting. Decreased problem behaviors, we're going to be providing those opportunities for our students to learn and demonstrate situationally appropriate behaviors, because moving to an alternative education center doesn't mean they're going to stay there forever. We're hoping that we provide these services and supports so that they can return to the gen ed setting, if at all possible, and ultimately increasing their academic success. And more importantly here as well, we're including families and students in that specialized treatment plans. Those families and students definitely need to be around the table when we're discussing their behavior education plan or their IEP. Without student voice, without family voice, we may be really significantly missing the boat. And that is so important, to bring family in and to help them with our treatment plan, but then also help them learn how to transfer some of what we're doing in that AE center into the home. This is also an area that we find is not often thought of in terms of bringing families in and really listening to families and students and what they say about their individual plans. This is also not a surprise for many of you on the call today. If you have participated in our YIP, our yearly implementation plan, this is something that we share every single time. We're bringing our leadership team together to talk about everything that you see at the top in blue, the partner engagement, funding and alignment, policy, workforce capacity, et cetera. And those folks have the ability to really dig into the data and identify what do we need in terms of a district. But more importantly today, what we're going to be talking about is, all right, we have folks around the table and we're going to be talking about what we need as a district and what that means for general education. But hey, we've got 5 alternative centers in our district that have unique needs and need resources and need assistance in terms of tailoring their unique environment to meet the needs of students. So once we have that level of discussion, it leads us to talking about training, coaching, evaluation, which will lead to that local implementation. We have recently received publication from our National TA Center on the PBIS Implementation Blueprint. You can find that at pbis.org. If you have not downloaded it, it is a long document, lots of details in there, but I do encourage you to review it and see if there's something in there that might help beef up that PBIS implementation plan. At this point, I'm going to ask you to think about all of those things that go into those executive functions of the leadership team through an AE lens. So if we're thinking about our schools and partner engagement, we've got some schools that are getting ready to implement, some that are just getting started. They've received training. Now they're looking at those benchmarks of quality and prioritizing their practices that they want to put into place. And we also have groups of schools that are just getting better. They've been implementing for 20 years, and they're just looking for ways to improve their participation with PBIS. So what I might suggest to you and what I have discovered in the research and the literature is when you're talking about alternative education settings, we need to identify all of the stakeholders, and it might look differently with the folks around the table. I recently met with a district, and we included administrators from the AE setting so that we could look at some data that specifically relates to them, but also maybe get some feedback and learn from them as well. What are their needs specifically? We want to assess the current climate. When I spent some time with the principal at the Chicago Forum, and some of the things that she stated during her presentation really have resonated with me and stayed with me. And she talked about, as a new administrator, walking into an alternative ed setting. And the first thing that she had to do was really assess that current climate, discipline practices, and levels of support and resources. And she needed to basically start over. She needed to start over with some staff, because some staff were not there for the right reasons. They weren't skilled. They weren't really happy there anyway. But she really needed to listen to the staff and learn more about the climate. How do students relate to the staff? What kind of relationships are existing there? What practices do they agree with, but what practices need to be reconsidered? And that was very important first step, is listening to the staff, families, and students that are in that AE setting. The next was funding and alignment. Funding and alignment has to do with supporting implementation at all three tiers, providing training, coaching, life skills curricula, reinforcements, and other supplies that meet the unique needs of those students, and aligning our initiatives. We oftentimes get caught up in silos. We're thinking about mental health resources. We're thinking about trauma-informed care. We're thinking about building those relationships, relationship building kinds of activities, whether we're doing morning meetings or not. But we need to consider those specialty trainings and align them with other practices that exist within the district, and maybe increase those supports, especially when it comes to training in terms of principles of behavior, crisis and de-escalation, restraint alternatives. We need to maximize the structure and all of those classroom PBIS elements that we look for in gen ed classrooms. We need to seriously consider them and how might they be adapted. Sometimes we have special classrooms that really need calming corners. I work with a district south of here that has done a really nice job of implementing calming corners and then building relationship-based practices as well. So might we incorporate these kinds of activities into the AE setting? The next, we're going to look at policy. This came up also as we were talking the other day because it related to actual disproportionate outcomes and looking at our data sources, making sure that the data is accurate, making sure that everyone can access that data. More importantly, in an AE setting, we also need to look at that data because sometimes data comes from other schools and it just carries over, it moves into the AE setting. Do we separate that data so that we can really identify what activities resources, strategies are we implementing that are positively affecting our students? Because that's really valuable information then to share with the gen ed setting when our students transfer back to where they need to be. The code of conduct is always the topic of consideration. Do we have a code of conduct that is flexible to support the needs of unique students? So in that, I mean, is a suspension, detention, whether it's in school suspension or out of school suspension, really top choices for our students, whether we're talking about gen ed or students with disabilities. We want to make sure that we have a hierarchy of consequences, that we're teaching, reteaching, we're modeling, we're thinking outside of the box, and what are some alternative activities that we can engage in that are considered to be consequences, but don't involve excluding the student from the classroom. That can also be a tough conversation because I know that there's various mentalities, there's various points of view on code of conduct. So it can be a really long discussion. Let's put it that way. When we're looking at workforce capacity, do we have staff that feel supported? And are they supporting students? Are they able to build relationships? Are staff reinforced? Are staff there that want to be there? Are we providing enough training with the tools that they actually need? Are we offering those tools? Do we have clear job descriptions that identify roles and responsibilities? Specialty training is a must because we are looking at students that really have unique characteristics. They have disabilities, they have behaviors that are commonly associated with those disabilities. So providing training to match that skill and knowledge is a must. Moving into training, starting with the basics. There's some literature out there that actually pulled together some group of folks that are working in alternative education settings, and they were asked, what do you really need? Well, we need the basics, right? We need to be trained in implementing with fidelity tier 1 to the best of our ability as we can. And oftentimes alternative centers will come back with, yes, but we're a tier 3 facility. Yeah, you might be. Absolutely. You are dealing and educating and supporting students with the highest level of need, but you need tier 1 in place. You need tier 1 in place first. We also need to be able to access those tier 2 supports for those students. So think about what training, orientation that you might be able to offer. And one of the other things that was mentioned in this focus group as well is consider the training frequency and options. Are you frequently providing training? Are you providing training at times that most of your staff can attend? Coaching. When we're coaching centers or when we're coaching classrooms with special needs, we need to consider the level of expertise of the coaching person as well. Does the coach or your point of contact have the specialty skills so that they can help support teachers in the classroom? They can build those positive relationships. They can offer de-escalation strategies on a regular basis. So they're actually going into the classroom. They're actually supporting at a higher level than what you might see at a gen ed setting. A very important message that I learned from this principal was you need to watch out for your staff in these settings and prevent burnout. So any way that you can incorporate reinforcements, any way that you can assess when students or when your teachers are like right at their last nerve, providing supports and building those relationships so teachers can tell you, hey, I've had it for the day. I've had it. I'm really struggling. I don't know what else to do. I need additional support. So allowing them to come forward with those requests is extremely important. And then again, finally evaluating. Is what we're doing working with our unique group of students? Are we providing the skills? Does the data tell us that we're providing those skills? Are we sharing the data with our key stakeholders? Those are extremely important just in gen ed settings as well. And lastly, looking to start small. If you're a district that has alternative centers, they're not all implementing PBIS, start with one that's willing to go that extra mile and learn about tier one, be trained in tier one. So they would fall into that category of getting ready or getting started. And then share what you've learned with your other AE centers. Now, I have done enough talking. I'm going to check my time. It's 10:35, and I am going to introduce Joanne Swayze, my dear friend from Martin County, whom I just adore. Let me just put it out there. I adore her. I have learned so much from her. When I started working in Martin County, I was so green, and being part of that behavior team, learning from people that were in the trenches. Joanne was one of the people that just taught me so much, and I respect and appreciate her being here today. So Joanne, I am going to turn this over to you. I thank you so much for being a part of today.
Thank you very much, Robin. Well, you know, I adore you too. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I actually started with PBIS back in the early 2000s in a general education elementary school, but I was the coach for that school, but had my own self-contained autism self-contained classroom. From there, I've coached middle schools and high schools. I've been working with students with autism from just diagnosed all the way up through, I believe the oldest now is 80 years old. So I've kind of been around the gamut. I left the school district in 2016 because there were needs for adults with autism that could not be addressed as well within that school setting. So I came here, and the Hope Center, it was a small school. We're growing by the minute. And the first thing that I did with our staff was PBIS. They were well versed in applied behavior analysis, but had not experienced PBIS on a school-wide level. So that is how we started change and moving forward for the future of our students. We are now a pre-K through 8th grade school. We have students who are on access points as well as the general curriculum. We currently have 95 students and 64 staff members, also changing on a regular basis. And we have about 190 students on our wait list. Our goal, though, is not to keep any of our students, it's to get them in, get them the supports that they need, figure out how to change those supports so that they are easily implemented in a general school setting, and then get them back to those less restrictive settings. That doesn't always happen, of course. We have students with much more intensive needs who will need to remain here, but always our end goal is independence. So we do work very hard on that. Our tier one expectations here at Hope are be safe, communicate, and try your best. All of our students know our expectations. We actually introduced that through a song that we did many years ago, and they love that song, but they do know what those expectations mean, and we translate them into all of our environments. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But across the board at Hope, we do have expectations that classrooms have to put in place. And the first and probably most important is engineering the structure of our environments. We actually just had restructured our gym setting after Christmas, and our coach came to me today and he said, you know, right before the holidays, I did not know if I have more than a couple years left in me. But now that we've increased the structure in the building and implemented that, he said, you know, I feel renewed. I know that I can keep going because our students are much more independent. I can do the things that I needed to do here. So putting that structure in place, keeping it in place, and then constantly evaluating that structure is really important. Understanding the needs of your students. So structure isn't always visual. I always tell my teachers, if you walk in a room and can't figure out where a center starts and stops, or if you don't know the expectations of a center or an environment in that classroom, then we need to change something. We need to readapt how we visualize that area, whether it's with a physical barrier or we put tape on the floor or whatever that is, so that everybody understands the expectations. We also do a lot of work here with hidden curriculum so that everybody can understand what those expectations are across environments. Many of our staff members here also have autism. So that does keep us honest at all times, which means that we have to be very clear about the expectations across environments. And that also helps our students to understand those expectations. We, of course, get very in depth with the hidden curriculum, which is basically all those hidden rules behind an environment. So just an example is if you walk into, let's say, Dunkin' Donuts, and you're standing in a line, we all understand the expectation is that you're not standing on top of the person. You might not be screaming into your phone. You're respectful and paying attention to the line, whereas those same expectations might be different at, let's say, a concert environment. So we need to be explicit, identify how they look differently. And then all of these supports result in increased student engagement because they don't have to be anxious about the environment around them. They understand the expectations, and that means that they can attend to instruction and be much more independent in that setting. We do a lot of self-monitoring here. That is our ultimate goal. And if we can teach our students how to self-monitor, they have less reliance on adults. And we put those supports in place and then also send those supports outside into so that private behavior staff can use them, families can use them. We do need to trust that reinforcement is happening, and we need to trust that the right reinforcement is happening. If we start to see a shift in student behavior, that's always the first place that I look. Have we satiated the students? Are we reinforcing them with what they're reinforced by, not what we are reinforced by? I tell them that all the time. If a student is reinforced by standing on their head for 5 minutes, but you think that's a bad idea, it doesn't matter. That might be what we need to do. And we need to figure out a safe way to put in that reinforcement that is acceptable to everybody and can provide that motivation for the student to be engaged. We do respond to inappropriate behavior, but there is a rule across the school here that if you have trouble or get in trouble, you don't go home, you stay longer, not shorter. This goes across the board for staff as well. If you're challenged with whatever is going on in the classroom, then it's my job to figure out how to better help you understand our student population and better support their needs. A lot of our students come here and they have been expelled or suspended in a number of environments. The first thing that they will say to us is, I will be gone by lunchtime. And I explain to them quickly that that is not how this environment works. So this is an example of some of our self-monitoring tools that we use here. We use a token economy across our entire school. We started this token economy system many years ago in a extended school year program, and it's kind of grown over the years. Students earn tokens during the day. Every classroom is a little bit different as to how those tokens look because of the needs of their students. But for the most part, students will earn about 5 tokens in the morning and around 10, 15-ish across the school. Students start turning in their tokens for what we call here bead break, but really what it is a social opportunity. The students have about 15 minutes to engage in a preferred environment or preferred activity. We used to do that so that they'd learn how to do some group social interactions. Unfortunately, COVID has kind of got in the way of some of that, but what we do is they earn those tokens. If a student hasn't earned enough tokens at that point, then they have the opportunity to earn them. So their friends may be playing with a video game in a corner while they're getting their work done as quickly as possible, and then they get to go to that environment. The important part of this is that our students need to learn how to feel that success first. It's really, really important. And that we give them an opportunity. So the first time that a student doesn't earn bead break is that's an opportunity too for us to help that student learn how to earn it later on in the day. But also, if you know that a student has, let's say, 20 math problems to complete, try to figure out a way to reduce that so that that student can get to bead break and feel that success. And then we slowly increase those expectations. We do have another bead break in the afternoon right before students get home. I will tell you that the first month or so of these activities is sometimes not very pretty. We do have students who cry and who have issues that they did not earn bead break, but if we do it right, quickly enough, our students learn the expectations. I have 95 students on this campus with 254 and 55 matrices, meaning that they have pretty intensive needs. And by October, we had very few meltdowns over bead break. Everybody knows the expectation if it's implemented consistently. We do not take away beads or tokens unless that is part of their behavior plan. And we don't really take them away. What we do say is, right now, I see that you're not being safe. I'm going to hold your token until you're ready. And then we give that token back. But again, only as part of a behavior plan, because that is very negative and we want our students to be successful. Tier 2 at Hope is an opportunity to generalize the skills that they've learned. We do have lunch bunches, which are basically a social communication time. The replacement behavior for many of the behaviors here is communication. So that gives us an opportunity to generalize skills. We also do a lot of small group social skills based on the needs of our students. So social thinking is a little bit of a different approach. It teaches the why behind why we do certain behaviors and does make a lot of sense to our very high functioning students on the spectrum. And often makes a difference to whether or not they're going to use those skills. We do check in and check out here. I think that that is very important for a lot of our students. It structures their day and gives them an opportunity to be reinforced by somebody outside of the classroom, as well as within the classroom, because sometimes our staff gets a little tired. We do need to have that excitement in other areas too. And it also gives them an opportunity to see preferred staff. Our students do move up to different grade levels, and sometimes they had their best buddy might have been their pre-K teacher. So this gives them an opportunity to be continuously reinforced by that other staff. Not always teachers and paras, sometimes up in the front. We have one of our more intensive needs students will yell during the day for our secretary. And he's learned to do that because usually when anybody needs help here, they yell for Miss Barbara. And he's learned that. And so Miss Barbara has become his person. So we do work through that with all of our students. I'm going to take a sip of water. I am still going through long COVID with my throat, so I apologize. We do use something called the Comprehensive Autism Planning System here, or CAPS for short. And what this is a way to identify what supports are needed during the school day for the students, because those supports change. If you're in math, you may need to increase the reinforcement schedule for a student. If you're in bead break or social times, you might not need as much reinforcement, or depending on the needs of that student, you may need even more. So we identify what those supports are. And then this tool goes with our students when they leave us, so that wherever the student is, the teachers will know how to best implement the strategies that have been proven successful for that child. These tools can be very complex, so that we put in visuals of how to do those things and implement them. It's also a really good training piece too. One of the other things that we do here is there you go, is a
Sorry.
5-point, nope, that's good. It's a 5-point scale that we use for our crisis plans. So a 5-point scale identifies what supports are needed at each point of the student's behavior. We do these scales that are generalized, which is the one that you see here, which is more for loud noises so that our students understand what level of voice volume to use. But we also have very individualized ones, which may have pictures of what a student looks like at each level of behavior. And then we clearly identify that. So, for example, at 0, a student is doing a great job. So they may be sitting in their desk, completing their work. The staff at that same time might have a column that identifies that staff is expected to be reinforcing that student every 5 minutes with a token or a gummy bear or whatever it is for that kid. At level 1, that student might be starting to tap their fingers or might be looking around the room. So the staff at that point needs to increase the level of reinforcement. So now rather than every 5 minutes of reinforcement, we might be reinforcing every 3 minutes for that student. And then we need to look at, maybe we need to offer the student a break. Level 2, we might again be implementing increased reinforcement, but then there might be some other strategies that are put in place that we tell the student, you're showing me this behavior that tells me that you need A, B, and C, all the way up to a level 5, where often a level 5 is a restraint. I will say we have very few restraints here. They typically occur at the beginning of the school year when we have new students. And we're learning that because they come in and we're not sure of what their needs are. By October, I don't think actually we've had a restraint here since September. That's very typical. Sometimes when we come back after the holidays, we might have a few more. We had none this year. And then sometimes during testing season, I call it, we might have some more increased behavior. But as a school, that tells us that we need to change our procedures so that we increase reinforcement for not just the students, but also the staff. One of the big things that we focus on here too is executive function. Those are the skills that our students need to be successful and independent outside of the setting to reduce the amount of staff that is needed within this setting and future settings, and give our students the independence they need. There is a SLP that our speech language pathologist out of Boston named Sarah Ward that has identified a number of executive function supports that have been tweaked in ways that really help our students. They're a little bit different than many of the things that we've heard in the past, but I will tell you that they are amazing for many of our students. It definitely is the difference between success and being challenged throughout the day. One of the things that we do here too is a weight area. You'll see at the bottom, there's a chair. Every classroom here has a weight area, and we use that not just during the day for transitions, but it's also used for emergencies. So at a transitional area in the classroom, we have a row of chairs, one for each student. Some classrooms may have magazines underneath the chairs or some fidgets or something for the students to do. But what happens is if there's a signal, a common signal that is used throughout the day and practiced regularly, often it's the timer buzzing. All students know that they go directly to that weight area and then they wait for further instructions. That helps us a lot through active assailant drills, tornado drills, fire drills. We use that same signal for emergencies as we do for getting them to that weight area throughout the day. And it is a huge safety piece for us. But there are a gamut of different supports that make a huge difference to all of our students. We do use the iBurst here, which is the individual behavior rating scale tool. And a lot of times too, this will be easily incorporated into the use of our 5-point scales. One of our behavior analysts here loves the use of this tool. We do track both problem behaviors and replacement behaviors very well here. That has been a long process, but I'm happy to say our staff is well versed in tracking replacement behaviors at this point. And then we can look at how often our students are using those behaviors throughout the day. The plus of this iBurst is that you don't have to monitor all the time throughout the day, which is often very difficult. And teachers can go back at the end of the day and identify what the student was doing. And then we can talk together later on about how to put changes in place. One of the really important pieces of all of this is that at Hope, we do weekly progress monitoring. So we meet with the teachers, paraprofessionals, speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, all the staff, and review student behaviors and put changes in place if we do not see change in behavior or academic performance, so that we can make those changes quickly. We do use Prevent, Teach, Reinforce. If you're not familiar with that program, I highly suggest that you get familiar with it. It is amazing and very clearly identifies for our staff how to best support the behavioral needs of our students. So Prevent identifies those environmental modifications and different supports that need to be in place to ensure our students are successful. Teach identifies how we're going to teach those, how to use those supports, how we can teach different skills, and then Reinforce, of course, is how we're supporting the demonstration of replacement behaviors in these different environments. It has been amazing for our staff. They love it. It has taught them quite a bit. Probably one of the other very important pieces here is our staffing. These are 3 of our great staff that have been with us for years. They're an amazing team. And we are very big on teamwork here. When I interview staff, one of the things that I tell them is, you will be bitten, hit, scratched, sniffed, licked, everything known to man while you are here. If you do not like that, please do not come here. This is not an environment for everybody. Our students have needs, and we have to understand that. If I had a staff here who was going to be upset every time they were hit, we would not get through the day. However, what I do have is a staff here who understands the need to tap out from time to time. They take turns with each other throughout the day. We do a lot of teaming here during Christmas time, the first time that we've done this, but it turned out great for our staff. We had a beach bonfire for our holiday party, and it gave them an opportunity to just kind of hang out and enjoy each other, and they need those opportunities. If you step back one, Robin, I know I'm running through. One of the other things that we do here is we have a monthly assembly, and we bring all of our students together. We do have a few that this is a very challenging environment for, and would be cruel and unusual punishment if we brought them in. We get them ready for this down the road, but the majority of our students come. They wear headphones. We have different supports in place for everybody, and we invite all of our families and sometimes community members, and we reinforce our students for success. We have students of the month. We celebrate birthdays for staff and students and positive attendance here. And a lot of our students are nonverbal and require that routine. So all of our students know that when they get called up, we wait, they all hold up their certificate, and the entire gym screams and yells and supports them. And you would think that this would be a very overwhelming experience. We have done this so regularly. Our kids know to expect it. They absolutely love it. And they couldn't be prouder of their accomplishments, and neither could their parents be. You know, a lot of our parents don't get to see them doing positive things, and they absolutely love this day. So it is a lot of fun. Now, the next slide is my favorite because this is my dog. Her name is Leia. And Leia has grown up here. So she can also take a hit. She knows how to deal with that and is very docile, thank God. But one of the things that we taught Leia was how to ask for things with a button. And our students have learned that Leia does not get a treat unless she asks, which again is a replacement behavior for a lot of our kids. So, and thank you. Yes, she is adorable. Everybody knows too, if you want to make me happy, you say something nice about Leia. So
Yeah, and
Leia,
it's just amazing to see this dog
yeah.
press the buttons and ask for a treat, or it's
Mhm.
amazing to see that.
We don't allow that at home, though. That's a very bad behavior on my part. I do not care. She would ask constantly at home and she'd be 1,000 pounds. So we can't do that. But Leia comes to school, she gets dressed, she picks out her outfit, and the kids get to work for Leia on Fridays. And it has been amazing. This is our classroom assistance tool. It was actually adapted initially from the classroom assistance tool with USF and PBIS. And we adapted it in Martin County many, many years ago for the autism program. And then later, our 5 counties in our area adapted it again through USF, or I'm sorry, FAU card. And everybody uses this to identify the supports that need to be in place in every classroom for success. I'm going to tell you that there is no classroom that is perfect. I don't have that expectation. The expectation I do have here is that if you're having trouble implementing one of those strategies or supports, that you tell me and that we can help you get that in place. Again, this is B Break. We do have a token economy video that's a little long, but it was created by a lot of teachers and administrators. So I think that it's helpful if you need to share this with others. And it does go through how to implement a token economy in a variety of settings. So that is me. And Robin, we are back to you. I ran through as quickly as I could.
No, you did a fabulous job, and we started a few minutes late, and I mean, you did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
So just in closing, these are the resources that I referred to earlier. You can find them at the Center on PBIS, and please explore some of our other resources to help support your alternative education environments. So if there's anyone who wants to hang out, I know we went over, I apologize. If there's anyone that wants to hang out and ask a question, feel free to do so. Joanne, thank you. Fabulous job.
Yeah, I love doing it.
Thank you so much. That was so great. I did put up the poll. If you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to fill out the survey that should be on your screen right now. This gives us some feedback about our chats, what we can add, what you liked about it. So we really appreciate it. And I'll give it a few minutes for you guys to fill out the poll. And in the meantime, looks like you're getting lots of thank yous in the chat. And Molly Gummerson did say she has a question. Should she just unmute?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Molly, go ahead.
Okay, I had a question. We're a middle school, high school, and I'm consistently looking and not exactly finding resources that are geared more toward the demographics at our school, maybe more of like a more experienced trauma-informed resource category for high schoolers, let's say. I seem to find a lot for middle school, but not so much for high school.
Yeah, and high school can, it is a little bit of a different group. I will tell you though, we've had high schoolers, teachers who have implemented these token economies, but they just look a little bit different. Sometimes there's class-wide incentives. I believe on the video, it's been a little bit since I've looked at it, but I believe that there is a high school teacher that talks about how she did it. One of the things that they did was have in this general education biology classroom, the teacher had preferred seating. So the students, she had like a jar, and when the kids were good, she'd write their name down or whatever that looked like. And then she'd pull out their name at the end of the class, and that kid would get to have the preferred seating maybe the next time. But dealing with the trauma is really difficult. We do use eye movement desensitization and reprocessing here. We have a mental health counselor that's full-time, so we are a little bit different. With my population for higher functioning folks, we do have some different after-hour social skills groups, and we'll use something called cartoon conversations and walk through different situations and scenarios. A lot of our very high functioning on grade level kids oftentimes have a lot of those more EBD like behaviors. And so we have to build a lot of relationships with them before we can get through to the rest of the issues. So it is a little more difficult, but it definitely can be done.
Thank you so much.
And
Great question. Great
Yeah.
question. Go ahead, Betsy.
oh no, I was just going to say there's a couple more questions in the chat. Deanna Coleman wanted to know what you did to be able to have your dog incorporated into the school with students.
So that is a plus of being in a charter school. I know that they're not allowed in a lot of places. I will tell you that there is a great program. I have not used it here, but I've seen all of the research on it. It's called Mudagrees. It is implemented in other places. And humane societies allow schools or teachers to have foster dogs in their classroom. There's a whole curriculum that goes with it. I don't know how you're going to get past some of those other things, but I do say that Leia is my perk here. So,
And I have seen dogs on campuses throughout the state. I'm not sure the process they went through, but there are a couple of schools I've seen that have their
Mhm,
dogs on
mhm.
campus.
And
So
she
yeah,
is-
Yeah, me too.
she is trained, so it isn't like we just brought her in from nowhere. And I do make sure that that we are cautious. That's why she is in my room. I rarely take her into the classrooms because they're so busy sometimes, and all the kids would dart at her. So, you know, we are very cautious with that. But we have other people who bring their dogs too, because she is very motivating.
Absolutely. And then I think it's Stephanie Martinez
Stephanie. Mhm.
has a question for you as well.
That's actually probably one of my district coordinators. So if I gave you the link and you've got a question, please ask.
Can you clarify that, Stephanie?
Several of people could not get in today, so I had to provide them my link. So when they logged in, they logged in
Oh,
as me. So
Gotcha.
if I sent you a link and you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
And she said she's muted. I did see earlier a Stephanie Martinez, maybe you, Steph, or maybe
Okay,
one of your
here,
friends.
Nicole.
Oh, there
Oh,
she
okay.
goes.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to know who was to Joanne. This is to Joanne. Who was the speech pathologist from Boston that you worked with?
And her name is Sarah Ward. If you look
Sarah
up
what? Ward?
Ward, I'll write it in the chat, and I did put my email address in there also if you need it. But it is called Cognitive Connections, and if you go on her website, she's got a lot of free stuff on there too. But it is amazing stuff. So
Okay, thank you very much. I think she
You're
may work
welcome.
with not Brenda Smith Miles, but another person that I'm
yes,
familiar with.
yes, absolutely. Mhm.
Alrighty, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
and Joanne, I think you have just provided so much information of how you specialize the environment, how you serve the unique students that you have. Very specifically, you've sought resources outside of what we would normally look at in terms of PBIS, and you have integrated everything beautifully. And it's obvious when you go to the school, it's amazing. I think the thing that impresses me the most when I go there is the young adults that have started their own group
Yes.
at Hope after hours, after school hours,
Yes.
and Yeah, you want to talk about that a little bit since everyone is still like hanging on here?
We have a group. It was actually very interesting. We had groups in high school, and unfortunately, our high schoolers who graduated did not want to leave high school for the social group. So we had to make something for adults. And what happened was the initial couple of times that we did it, there was a young man who was in middle school that had come here. I actually walked out of the room for a few moments when he was here. And when I walked back in, he was talking to the adults about something that had happened in middle school that day. And the adults were telling him how they had dealt with those same issues. And it turned into an amazing situation. We don't have all of our middle schoolers with our adults for quite understandable reasons. They're often a little bit immature, so they would drive the adults a little crazy. So it depends on what the situation is, but we do have adults who volunteer now with our middle school group. It is very socially oriented. We have about 30 to 35 that come every week on Wednesday evenings, and then we have another group on Tuesday evenings for middle schoolers, and we are starting a group now for our very high functioning college graduates on the spectrum who are meeting on a separate night because their needs are a little bit different.
Yeah, it's just been amazing. And
It's fun.
you know, you can't find very many communities that offer that type of service.
And I don't do it. My staff runs those
Right,
groups now,
right.
which is amazing because they all took it over, and I have more than enough people who want to get to know them. It's also a great example for teachers of pre-K students to look at what autism looks like when they're in their 30s and 40s. But we do also hire many adults with autism, so they work with them here too. So.
That's amazing. Okay, I think we have, I don't
And
see
any other questions?
questions.
You can
Well,
always feel
Joanne,
free to email. So if you have anything you need.
yeah, and Joanne did provide her email contact in the chat, or you can reach out to me and I can share with you Joanne's contact information as well. If there's anything else you might need. But wonderful example of really capitalizing on really significant planning, adaptations, modifications to PBIS. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you. And one more thing, because I don't think you're going to get to see it in the chat. One of the participants said that their son attended that program and it was amazing. He's in college now. Thank you, Joanne. So that little piece of
Very nice.
feedback. It's why we do this work, right?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you.
you guys so much. And thank you guys all for participating. This chat will be available on YouTube and on our website within the next few days. So take care. Have a wonderful rest of the day.